We can't have everybody just retire when they're 45 and leave medicine. We've got to figure out a way to make medicine better so that we can stay in it. Because boy, when you're the patient, you don't want someone that just took an online class and is trying to manage this stuff. You want a physician. You want a doctor that's been properly trained and has the years of experience to just show up and say, hey, I'll walk this path with you. I got you. And that's such a rare seat that we get to sit in.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor! 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 Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schloe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Today's guest has lived medicine from every single angle as a physician, a patient, and now an advocate for doctors everywhere. Dr. Peter Crane didn't just return to his rural hometown to practice. He stepped into the shoes of the very physician who delivered him. But when a 28-centimeter tumor turned him from a doctor to a patient, his perspective on medicine changed forever. Now, through his podcast, Doctors Making a Difference, Peter is amplifying the stories of physicians who are redefining what it means to impact lives inside and outside of the clinic. His message is simple but profound. Doctors can change lives, but we have to protect our physicians from burnout so they can continue to care for patients who depend on them. Peter, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you taking the time to have me on the show.
Absolutely. Yeah. For folks who don't know, this is our third attempt at a podcast. So really excited for this episode. Dr. Crane, thanks for joining us here. Peter, you have a unique story. So let's just jump right in. You returned to your hometown and even stepped into the shoes of the doctor who delivered you. What drew you back? What was that like stepping into that legacy?
Well, when you're first starting out, you have big dreams. You're going to live everywhere and you're going to try all these things. And I remember when my wife and I got married, one of my cousins pointed to my little hometown on a map and he drew a circle. He's like, you're going to live somewhere on this circle, we were like, ha ha, funny. And then, years later in residency, the hospital administrator in the town where I'm from, knew I was on this path to become a doctor. And he approached me and said, hey, we're going to need a doctor in a couple of years. And, they made it financially helpful. They helped pay off, some of the loans and gave us a little bit of a stipend to live on. And so it made it really attractive at that point because I didn't have any money. And so my wife and I thought about it, prayed about it. And when it actually came down to decision time, that's what we decided to do. And it turned out, I couldn't have known that at the beginning, but the doctor who was actually the doctor that delivered me was ready to retire. And when I came, that's when he retired. It was just kind of crazy how that worked, but it sounds like a storybook sort of thing, but that's actually what happened. And it's been a privilege to be back in the same hometown. I've been here for 14 years. I can't believe it.
That's amazing. Yeah. All you have to add is you moved back in the winter. There's a lot of snow falling and it would be a Hallmark movie. So
we do have a lot of snow. We do have a lot of snow. And my wife is from Arizona. So maybe it was good that we moved here in the summer because, then, you live in a high mountain place. You have to get used to winter and find something that you like for sure.
Absolutely. Well, there's lots of things to like in Idaho for sure. And so thanks again for your time. That has to be really cool and kind of really surreal to go back and take care of the community where you grew up in. Was there any, we all kind of have some imposter syndrome, I feel like, when we come out of residency. And I was just talking to a family member about what it's like when you see friends and you see neighbors in the practice. Did you have any sort of imposter syndrome going back to the town that you grew up in?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, I just remember that first few weeks working there because that's where I'd gone as a kid to go get sports physicals or wherever. And all right, I guess I'm the doctor now. It was quite surreal. And then the other part of it, there's two sides of a coin. You get to help a lot of people that you really care about. And that is really a privilege to be able to help them. On the other hand, sometimes you see people go through really hard times and they're people you really sincerely care about. And that's a real challenge sometimes when you have to do that. And so I guess the imposter syndrome kind of goes away when you start realizing that maybe if you weren't there, they wouldn't have anybody to take care of them. And then I guess the other part of it is you just get so busy taking care of folks that even though they knew you when you were a kid or they taught you in high school or whatever it may be, you can boil it down and say well, I'm glad I get to be here and help you with this problem. And, if they're nervous about it, they don't have to come to me. But a lot of people, find themselves to my door one way or the other because everybody gets sick. We all break.
Yeah, very true. And it's probably cool. I would think it would be comforting to know like, hey, this physician has roots here. They grew up here, like they're established. They really understand a little bit more of the social dynamics and social determinants of health in the community. So that would be really, really cool. I know, kind of mentioning folks getting sick, you had a life-altering moment when you went from being a physician to a patient. Are you willing to share what that journey looked like and how that changed your perspective on medicine and on life?
Oh, sure. Let me just back up one second on what you said with the just that cultural fit. That's pretty
Yeah.
important because like you build rapport with people, and then I think you learn to actually start to love your patients and actually care deeply about how they're doing, and that makes a big difference on how you do care for patients. And we've run a small family farm, and a lot of the people I take care of are farmers and ranchers, so it's been a real privilege to be able to care for them.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
as
I just now, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to make sure the internet was catching up with this. It's that story of kind of building rapport with patients. Like I've experienced that on the patient side too. Like I was, about to kind of share. I woke up one morning a couple of years ago. I was only 43 years old. I didn't think I was old enough to be sick, but I had this big mass I found in my abdomen, just laying there in bed early one morning, and I just had my hand on my stomach. I'm like, what is that bump? And I thought, well, maybe I had an enlarged spleen or something like that. And so I had my practice partner order a CT. And anyway, I was actually working in the ER, and I was looking at somebody else's result the next evening, and my result popped up, and I couldn't help but open it on the PAC system, and there it was, 28 centimeter likely sarcoma. I mean, that's like a kick in the teeth. It was a rough moment for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine what you felt like in that moment, especially being at work and finding that news. What was that initial kind of what was that like? What were thoughts were going through your head? What was that like and how did that impact you as a physician? And of course now kind of pivoting more towards you as a patient.
It's a hard thing to kind of quantify. Like in that moment, I would say the thing I felt most was just the, denial. This can't be real. It's something else. This is got to be somebody else's problem. Like I think like every kind of difficult, traumatic thing we go through, when you come up with some sort of really bad news, or, when there's a death in the family or something that you can hardly believe, your brain just like rejects it. And then it was just kind of like shock. How could that be? And yet I'm a physician, right? I'm working in the ER. I don't have anybody else to take my place. And so I read that, and then 10 minutes later, I'm out doing sutures on somebody or working up somebody else's abdominal pain, or, and I didn't really want to tell anybody. It's just like you have this horrible secret eventually has to come out and tell people. But I did call my wife and made her have a terrible evening. But I needed to tell somebody. And so that, that's just one of those moments where it's sort of this juxtaposition between those two roles. I've been a doctor, for a lot of years, and then suddenly I am very much a patient and needing doctors in the worst way. As I still had my 4 kids at home. One of them has gone off, left the home, but has grown up, but the other 3 are still home. And so I depend so much on the doctors who have cared for me. And I it's just crazy to go from one role to the other so suddenly like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot imagine what that was like, and how to continue with the shift in providing great care while working in the ER with that in the back of your mind. And I'm sure that was quite terrifying for you in those stages of grief that you had to go through. Was there anything that you noticed as the patient that changed how you practice medicine as a physician?
Yeah, I think so. When I contemplate like what it's like to be a patient, I don't think I was ever, a non-sympathetic doctor, but I think, when often my days involve going in for a treatment or going in for care, and then the very next hour, I'm doing some sort of a IV treatment or an infusion or whatever it may be, or I'm seeing a consultation, or even during radiation treatment. I would go, the closest radiation treatment center is an hour and a half from my home. So I would just get up early and either have somebody drive me there, or I would drive myself. And then I would do my radiation treatment and then come back and see patients all day. And it was just, I guess it gives me a hope, because in the morning I'm dressed up in a hospital gown and I'm doing all these treatments. And then the afternoon or later in the morning, I'm a patient, and I guess it just maybe a renewed sense of compassion and concern for the patients that are going through these challenging things, because I'm going through it too. And when I say I get it, I understand, rather than just that being an empathetic statement. I can say that with sincerity for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. How, if you don't mind me asking, how has that process been? Where are you in terms of treatment and so forth of that sarcoma?
So, I went through radiation and then had a large surgery a couple of years ago. And then that was quite a recovery process because there was some damage to the nerve, controls my quads on my leg. It took quite a few months of rehab to be able to walk and run and do all that kind of stuff. I didn't know how that was ever going to turn out, but I was so thankful for the therapists and the doctors that kind of helped me through that. And then I've shared on the podcast, that this tumor, it's good to kind of raise a little bit of awareness of this rare type of sarcoma. It's called a solitary fibrous tumor. And unfortunately, they tend to metastasize later on. And that's, I've shared that on the podcast. So unfortunately, this last year, I found a couple metastases. So now I have to take some more medicine to try to keep those from growing, and just praying that they'll grow really slow and that they keep finding more and more treatments so that maybe we keep this down, keep it at bay. Because I got a lot to do in this life, and I sure would like to stick around.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a lot more mountain biking and backpacking in the Tetons, as we were talking about before the show.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It is the best. Well, let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about your podcast, Doctors Making a Difference. What was the inspiration behind your podcast? What did you feel, or why did you feel it was important to kind of highlight the voice of physicians who are making an impact both in the clinic and outside of the clinic?
So a few years ago, I had this thought. I think I'd heard the word burnout one too many times. People talk about it so much, and I thought, oh man, the doctors that are out there are doing so much good, and there's got to be a better way than just talking about building resilience and how everybody's burned out. I mean, it seems too trite, too simple for something that has taken years of your life to build. And there's got to be a way to stay in medicine, to find a way forward, to make it fit your life. And so I'd had that thought before, but I never really acted on it. And then when I got this crazy surprise diagnosis and was going through surgery and rehab, I remember one distinct moment when I was laying in the recovery room, in the hospital, in the cancer center, and I was looking out the window, and I was just, thinking about all the people that had helped me and the tens of thousands of hours that they had cumulatively put together to be able to help me in that moment and help my family. And the clear thought that I had was, if I got to do it again, I'd be a doctor. That's what I would want to do, because I didn't know if I'd ever get to go back to work. I had no idea what was in my future, but that was a pretty clear thought. And I had that thought, and it just became more clear than it ever had. I need to highlight the voices of the doctors, and whatever I can do to make medicine a little bit better than I found it, and try to highlight people that really are doing this and finding a way to live their lives and find some measure of balance and still go on and make this tremendous impact. We got to do it. We can't have everybody just retire when they're 45 and leave medicine. We've got to figure out a way to make medicine better so that we can stay in it. Because boy, when you're the patient, you don't want someone that just took an online class and is trying to manage this stuff. You want a physician. You want a doctor that's been properly trained and has the years of experience to just show up and say, hey, I'll walk this path with you. I got you. And that's such a rare seat that we get to sit in. The U.S., worldwide, I guess, but the U.S. medical system tends to spit people out and kind of make it rough to actually be a doctor. And yet we need doctors so bad and so badly. And that's why I felt inspired to do the podcast. And even if it doesn't make a dime, I would like to make sure that these voices are highlighted and the practical tools that are out there to help people become better doctors and to stay in medicine are there. And I wish somebody had told them to me earlier. So I figured, let's get this out. Let's get this word out there and hear from other doctors and other people who understand this.
Absolutely. Well, you're making a difference, and so grateful that you're spreading the word and being an advocate for physicians. In regards to the practical tools, what are some things or maybe some trends that you've noticed while doing the podcast that tend to stick out?
I think a lot of the people I talk to have done a pivot or a shift. They've kind of figured it out. And I guess they're maybe one step ahead of me or one step ahead of our peers where they've said, it's okay to shift. It's okay to change. It's okay to find something different so that I can stay in medicine, stay in practice, and continue to be a whole person. And that's one theme that I've noticed. The other theme that I think is pretty important and maybe a little bit relevant to your podcast is we talk about financial independence, and as a concept, but these folks that I'm talking to, when they've made a pivot or a shift or something that allowed them to stay in medicine, or they see a hole in medicine and they go fix it. And it's because they have the education, they have the knowledge, they've got the people around them, but they've also played the financial game right. They're not the people who are 60 years old with, $1 million of debt. They're folks who've slowly saved and been careful. And when that moment arrives where they have an opportunity to make a little switch or shift, they're able to do so because they're on the path to financial independence, or they've already achieved financial independence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some degree of financial independence or financial freedom or passive income, however you want to look at it, is a protective metric. And it also gives you that freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want to, which we talk about all the time. And, that's really why I started this podcast, kind of to document my journey. And I'm, super fortunate and blessed that I put in the time and the effort. And now I'm practicing medicine 2 days a week at a direct primary care clinic. And I love it. And I got to talk to a patient today for an hour and wasn't rushed. And it was just a great conversation. And the care that you can provide and the care that I feel like I'm providing there is just absolutely incredible. And it's made me fall in love with medicine again, even more than where I was at when it was hey, I'm seeing 20, 22 patients per day. And you have all these messages and everything else that's kind of dragging you down. And so I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't in the financial position that I've worked really hard to get to and been really fortunate and blessed to be at. And so I do think it can be really helpful for folks. Anything else that you've noticed or any other role you've noticed financial resources or financial literacy has played in reducing burnout or giving physicians more control over their lives throughout your podcast or your experience?
So I think, what I wish, and you probably have the same thing, I just wish that I had been taught these tools even in a more formalized way than I was, because I felt like I discovered this whole idea that, hey, you can save and make yourself on a path toward financial independence a lot earlier. And I wish that I had understood. I don't think I made any terrible mistakes, but I just didn't understand the concept that if you save enough early on, just in an average stock market, what you put in there would generally double in about 7 years. And if you have that concept in your early 30s, when you're starting to finally have an income and you sock it away, that'll be money that'll bless you. And if you, whatever you've put in there, if you've gotten your place, if you're on that path, then it allows you to do anything. And I think that message needs to just be shouted from the mountaintops to our peers, and especially those that are in residency and medical school on the time when you're taking debt on. Try to minimize the debt load. Look at tools to have somebody else help pay your debt off. I've talked to a bunch of people who've worked in military or state or federal loan repayment programs, Indian health services, so many different options to kind of help with that debt burden. And then it makes a big difference. And, the other one, just to kind of highlight, is this concept of geographic arbitrage. A lot of folks maybe don't think about it, but it's convenient to work in a suburb or in a city. And maybe those are the jobs that are most readily available. But think about if someone who works in a rural environment or in a place with high needs, a lot of times, not only are they getting their loans paid for, but a lot of times their base salary is higher and their potential for productivity is higher because they're just so much more needed. One of the doctors I work with told me you can either be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond.
I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, geographic arbitrage is a great way. I mean, imagine moving somewhere rural where your cost of living is so much less, your income so much higher, that delta is massive, and then you can really sock away some income. I had a buddy, he was a neurologist, and he was finishing up his residency. He got offered this crazy job in rural Alaska where he was going to be a neurologist and kind of run their stroke center in this very rural part of Alaska. And he was going to be making $800 to $1 million per year. And he's like, man, I'm going to go do this for a couple of years. I'm just going to go do this for 2-3 years. He wasn't married at the time, no kids, and save that income. And that's going to completely change my life, completely bless my future family, and go from there. And he did. And so there's opportunities like that. It may not be $800,000, $1 million a year type job, but it may be a significant amount of money that you can pocket the difference for. And maybe it's living in an area you don't want to for a couple years, but that could potentially transform your life down the road. Another thing I talk about a lot that I think residents should consider purchasing a house while they're in residency and doing a co-living scenario where you either rent out the rooms or you rent out the basement or something like that, where you can potentially live for free or come close to living for free, or potentially make some money in cash flow depending on the property while you're in residency.
I just think that if people understand these concepts and these tools early on, it makes a huge difference down the road. Another thing that you probably have talked about is the difference in pay between physicians in the same specialty really is probably more variable than the difference in pay between different types of specialists. And that's an important concept to do, because you might seek a job that has a really low income within your specialty, but you can then go on, you can look at other places or other locations or other needs, and you may find, a six-figure difference, or you might have a $200,000 or $300,000 spread on initial income, depending on where you set up your first practice. And it does make quite a big difference. Like your friend that went to rural Alaska, think about how big of a difference that made in his financial life. As if he invests that and is careful with it in the years to come, that can be the root or the nest egg that will grow into what he needs it to become.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge opportunity. I was thinking about when I was getting out of the Air Force and I put my CV on, I think it was like Doc Cafe or something. And again, I went from, residency in the military to a job in the military, and I had never applied for a doctor job or anything like that. And I got a phone call right after I put that kind of CV in and filled out the little application, and I picked it up and they were like, "Hey, is this Dr. Schloe?" I was like, "Yeah." They were like, "Hey, what do you think about North Dakota?" I was like, "Well, I don't really think much about North Dakota." They were like, "Well, how about for
I just don't think about it.
And I was like, "Well, yeah," I was like, "I'm thinking about it a little bit right now." Of course, didn't end up happening, but it's just exactly to your point of like, you never know what offers are out there. And, if you're willing to live in a geographic area that might lead to more pay or decreased cost of living, it might be worth it for you.
Yeah, especially if you
Awesome.
can find something you like. If you find that you enjoy outdoor recreation, most people live in urban areas when you kind of balance out the United States, but most of our landmass is rural, and everybody goes vacationing in those rural areas like all the time, and they need doctors, and they're willing to pay a lot to have them there. And so when you bring that level of expertise and skill, they're willing to pay you for it because, like I said, you're the big fish in the small pond, and you have a lot bigger impact on that organization when you're there. And so I would just say, if you're a resident listening to this, look at that and say, okay, I could take, if you're a primary care doctor and you say like, okay, I could take a median, just a kind of a smaller salary in a nice suburban area where I think I'm going to want to live for the rest of my life. Or maybe we could go do something and hit it hard in an area for a few years, get those loans paid back, try to work this off, set up a nest egg, and then let that sit there and just park, and it'll double every 7 years, even if you later decide to move. And then some people, fall in love with those rural areas and they want to stay. And that can be a real blessing, for both people.
Yeah, I completely agree. Are any specific stories or doctors that stand out from your podcast? That any stories that really stuck with you that you remember?
Oh yeah, there's so many. Like, I hope folks will go to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast and file through it, because every one of those stories is just amazing. There's one I'll point you to. If you go to the podcast, you can type in Eric Arzubi, ERIC, and then Arzubi, ARZUBI. Eric's just an amazing guy. Real estate, stock, a broker guy, was featured in a lot of finance magazines, was really on the path to financial success from a stockbroker. And he had this moment in his early 30s and said, this isn't enough. I can't do this with the rest of my life because it's not important enough. And at that age, when he was, most people were graduating from residency, he went back to medical school, and now he lives in Montana. It's just making a huge impact on psychiatry care in the Western United States. The guy is just inspirational. So I encourage you to listen to that episode. Eric's a delight to talk to, and I really think about him sometimes when I'm kind of contemplating, like, okay, how big of a difference, how big of an impact what am I leaving with my life? And Eric's an inspirational guy to listen to for sure.
That's awesome. We'll have to check that out. I really appreciate that. If a physician's listening today and they feel trapped, they're feeling burnt out, what's one thing you feel like they can do this week to start moving forward more towards a life of balance, purpose, improve their life at home and their practice?
I don't know that I have all the answers, but one thing that I've actually found a little bit practical is, there's this concept to live like you were going to die. And, as someone with cancer, this becomes, relevant. And I don't recommend anybody else to get cancer. It's a rotten road to be on. But I do recommend for people to write it down and say, what does this look like? What does my day look like? And then where am I at now? And then what do I want it to look like? What does it look like ideally? And I'll tell you, for me, going through that process, I love the patients I take care of. I enjoy where I work. I enjoy the outdoor recreation. And I think if I got pick, I would keep doing what I'm doing, but I know that I probably wouldn't work 60 or 70 hours per week. It would probably look more like, 30 hours a week. Or imagine that, cutting back to 40 hours a week. That sounds incredible to a lot of doctors. That would be a big cutback. And so that process of just kind of fine tuning, say, what are the things that actually count? And if I got to only do this for a short time, what would be my top 2 or 3 things? And then look at that and say, if I'm not there now, what do I need to do to get so that my life looks like that?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times, as Tony Robbins says, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 5. And it's really just taking that next step forward. I mean, we were talking about backpacking, right? Like the easiest way to climb a mountain is just one step at a time. And you just have to get started and get going up that mountain. And before you know it, although it may be painful and you may stumble and fall, you'll get to the top ultimately, as long as you don't give up and you keep going. But I will say sometimes folks forget to take the time to sit back and look at the map and figure out, hey, what route am I going to take to get up the mountain? And that is a really important piece as well. Do you have any recommendations or guidance of books that you've read that have changed your mindset, or any kind of framework you use in terms of setting goals or your vision for the future for folks?
There's a bunch of them out there. One that I've really liked was by our colleague, Jim Dolly. He runs the White Coat Investor podcast, and he's written a couple of books, but that White Coat Investor strategy, or that platform, I think is really helpful, just to have a written financial plan and look ahead and say, what seeds am I planting now so that I can do this? And maybe it involves that geographic arbitrage concept, and maybe it involves taking a job with a higher pay, and maybe it involves cutting back some of the expenditures that you're doing in your life. And when you do hit that, either that financial independence number, or even more practical, you can kind of hit this concept of coast fire, where you say, like, oh, I haven't hit the number where I'm financially independent. But you can say, well, I hit half of that, and so it's all saved and I won't touch it. In 7 years, it's going to double, likely to be what it would be at the full amount. And then you still keep saving carefully, but you don't put things on hold. One time when my wife and I were about to get married, we had someone that gave us advice, and he said, just, don't go into debt for things, but have the experiences now. If you want to go on a trip, save up some money, stay with friends, go do it now. It's not going to sound fun when you're 65. You'll have different things that sound fun then. And so just live those lives, live that life, follow those concepts now, and don't keep putting off forever to the future what you want to do, because it's amazing how quickly life will pass. And when, chaos or health challenges come up, you never look back on how many hours you worked or how much money is in your bank account. You look on the things that you did, and the friends that you made, and the time you got to spend with people you love.
Yeah, that is so well said. I completely agree. I talk about the 10-year rule a lot that I got from my buddy, Brian Lubin. And basically, it's like, think about that event, that trip, that experience. And if you have the financial means to do it, and it's something you're going to talk about in 10 years or tell stories about in 10 years, you got to do it. Like it'll absolutely be worth it. It'll be worth the time for sure. And so I think so often we get wrapped up in like once I retire at age 65 or 70 or whatever that'll look like, then I'll do X, Y, and Z. And you never know what your house is going to look like. You never know what your financial situation is going to look like. Like just take the trip, buy the boat, go on the cruise, whatever it needs to be.
We set all these rules
financially.
We set all these.
Yeah. Yep.
We set all these rules
exactly
for
right.
ourselves about, I can't do this, or I have to work. And you just got to power through those and say, let's do the things that are most important. Yeah. I love how you said that, the 10-year rule. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the way to do it. And I think, the only people who are going to remember that we stayed late working at the hospital, working in the clinic, it's going to be our wife, our partner, and our kids. Those are the folks that we have to answer to down the road. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind and make sure that we're prioritizing the things in life that really do matter. Not to say that taking care of patients doesn't, because it's incredibly fulfilling, incredibly rewarding, and we're so grateful to have that opportunity to do what we do as physicians. But it can get really easy to fall into the trap of, I'll just see more, and work more, and tell yourself, oh, I'm just doing this for my family, when your family is really the one that's suffering. And so I think that it's something that folks need to hear.
Yeah, that's good wisdom. Back off and do the things that actually matter to you. And there's ways to do it. If you hate your job, find another one. I mean, there's so many jobs. You can totally shift or change. There's just a million different ways of doing this. Don't give up.
Yeah, I agree. Well, how can communities like your podcast audience and mine, how can they help doctors feel less isolated on this journey? How do you feel like we could support each other?
Well, I have found that podcasting is actually a great way to do it because you make these connections, and it's not just stories, it's real people, it's our peers. There's way more that unites us as doctors than what divides us. And reach out. I mean, if you hear about a great story on a podcast, connect with that person on LinkedIn. Like, hey, I heard your story on the Physicians and Properties podcast or the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. Tell me how you did this. Or you talked about this great coach that helped you, or somebody. Find those resources. It's not like this isolated group that everybody else ahead of you's got it figured out. Just ask. I think that's the thing I found the most as I visit with people. They're so willing to share, and they will tell you what's up, and they'll mentor you because they've been there. And people that are just a little bit ahead of us will look back and help us out. So that's a huge thing. Don't feel like you're isolated. And if you don't know somebody in your area that seems to understand, find them on LinkedIn or find them on Doximity, or go to a medical conference in your specialty. Connect with other people that understand this.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. I have nothing else to add there. It's, I've found that this community just really wants to help other doctors. We're all motivated to help doctors kind of learn these other things, figure out, hey, how can they make more of a difference? How can they have some freedom? How can we take better care of patients? So yeah, I definitely just want to help. And that's the whole reason behind my podcast, yours as well. Peter, after all you've been through, both as a doctor and a patient, what do you feel like making a difference means to you now?
So I think you just try to make the greatest good with what you've been given. Or another way to put it is try to be a good steward of what you've been given. Try to be a good steward of the things you've been given, because not everybody has everything. And I can't be Dr. Schloe. I can't be Dr. Smith. I can't be Dr. anybody. I can only be Dr. Crane. I can do what I can do. And if I'm gone, the only people that would really remember me is my family. And so I have to say, okay, I've got to be a good steward or a person that is a good overseer of the responsibility I've been given with my family, with my job. And so when I think about making a difference, that's it. Like, did I amplify my impact enough so that I was able to do the things I could do with what I've been given? And I remember there are times where I've not done that. And it's important to look and say, okay, what can I do? And how do I take good care of those things that are of greatest importance to me?
Absolutely. That's a beautiful framework to think through, as you're hitting different steps and different milestones in life and in practice. I love that. Well, Dr. Crane, where can folks find you if they want to reach out to you, they want to connect with you, they want to know more, and where can they find the Doctors Making a Difference podcast?
So the podcast is on any podcast player. Just type in Doctors Making a Difference. I'd love to interact with people on LinkedIn. That's a great place. Just Peter Crane, MD. Look through it that way. Or if they want to email me directly, it's just editor@doctorsmakingadifference.com. Like, again, I've just loved meeting doctors all over the place. And I think that's been a really fulfilling thing for me to kind of find out everybody's kind of in this battle together, and there's so much to learn from each other. And it is such a unique community. There's nobody else that's gone through quite that same experience, unless you've gone to medical school and residency and fellowship and really kind of understand what it is to work in medicine. And it's really a welcoming, delightful community. So I encourage people to reach out. I'd love to talk to you.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And we'll be sure to include those links in the show notes for folks as well. Dr. Crane, thank you so much for coming on the Physicians and Properties podcast tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Keep in touch. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, with that, it's been Dr. Peter Crane and Dr. Alex Schloe with another episode of the Physicians and Properties podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.